Hello, Flawless family. I'm happy to be joined today by Virgil Stucker, and Virgil is a mental health advocate and someone who has decades of experience with healing and wellness. As he is the founder and president of Virgil Stucker and Associates, where they work to empower mental health decision making. So, thanks for joining us, Virgil.
Well, goodness, thank you for the invitation, Trey. It's really good to be with you. I
Definitely,
appreciate it.
definitely. Pleasure's all mine. So Virgil, at Flawless, we think it's important to always check up on one another. So my first question to you is, how are you really doing right now?
That's not like I can say just okay, right? I need more than that.
Exactly, exactly.
So, I was thinking about that, Trey. It's like, man, we got this pandemic going on. We got all kinds of economic distress. We got political divisions that are troubling, emotional and mental health distress. Some days it feels like there's a tsunami coming from multiple directions at once. So it's like, whoa, how am I doing? Well, one concept I've got over this last year is my wife and I have been sort of in suspended animation, is a little bit how it's felt. We've been essentially isolated, for this last year. So during this isolation, goodness, I wake up every day, Trey, with such a feeling still of gratitude. I think of my family first, my parents who are still alive with meaningful lives, our four children, their spouses, our eight grandchildren, and I'm so thankful that they're all healthy and economically, living sustainable and meaningful lives. I've also been very grateful that during this isolation, I've been able to still serve individuals with serious mental illness, helping families find mental health care that they need, and in fact also taking some time to try and collect some of my thoughts over 40 plus years in this field to write a guide for families so that they might sort out some of the better ways to find and reach mental health recovery with their family member. Personally, you know actually I'm grateful I survived a bicycle accident I had about a year and a half ago that actually darn near killed me.
Wow.
I'm very grateful to be alive and still trying to find meaningful ways to live. Grateful that my wife and I actually got our first COVID vaccine shot this last Saturday. Just wishing everyone could do that.
Congratulations.
And, grateful, my goodness, that frankly, I'm grateful that we have a new president. And this happened last week. And it's like, I watched everything and it was like, Trey, over the last two nights, I think for almost the first time in a year, I've slept through both nights without anxiety dreams.
Wow.
And finally, I'd say I'm grateful. I'm a little older than you are, Trey. I'm 68. Goodness, my father's 102, so I'm still a youngster, also, right? But I'm grateful that I'm beginning to enter a transition. Um, it's really the transition, I guess, maybe of becoming an elder, and I'm trying to find out what that means and delving into it even spiritually lately. I've been studying something called dark matter and dark energy, trying to, you know, understand the universe. And actually a long interest in that, but it's like standing in awe of the mystery. It still inspires me, but mostly, I guess how am I doing? I'm still trying to keep standing as these various tsunamis hit us. There's so much suffering, and you can't help but feel that. But I'm doing okay. Thanks for asking. I hope you're doing okay, Trey.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. I'm also doing all right. I love your analogy of tsunamis because that's something that I feel like I felt as well. It just seems like there's so much different stresses in our life now that are all compounding at once and affecting us and whatnot. But I love you brought up so many good points I want to dive into as we continue our conversation with family, with connection, so I really just appreciate your honesty. I'm glad you're also here. Good to hear you recovered from the bike accident. But yeah, I mean, just that first answer has got me so excited to dive into all these topics. So continuing the conversation, especially for me as someone that wants to, pursue a career in mental health services. I admire your long and impactful career in this industry, in this field. So, I'm curious to know, like, what was your motivation to dive into this career path?
Well, first, let me say that it wasn't always my career path. As I was graduating high school, I was reaching more for the stars than anything else. And this was, 1970, I graduated. And what happened in 1969? Well,
Oh,
that's when, the moon landing. So,
yeah.
of course, I was going to be an astronaut. And goodness, I did get a congressional appointment to study astrophysics at the U.S. Air Force Academy. But what was happening at that time? Well, it was the Vietnam War. And I tell you, I was stopped in my tracks because a friend of mine was flying jets in Vietnam and dropping napalm on villages. And I guess he couldn't take it. He flew his plane into the side of a mountain and took his life.
Wow.
So that just shocked me so much. I said, whoa, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be learning the next summer to fly that same kind of plane.
Mhm.
So I turned and I said, let me go internal instead of looking for the stars. So I started studying philosophy. And during my 4 years getting a philosophy degree at a place called Ripon College, I did some things that were sort of life changing, helping me find a career path. I was the tutor for a young autistic boy who had been basically locked in a basement and found there. And I ended up helping him with his math and also helping him, feel again like a worthy human being. I was also a volunteer probation officer working with young adults. So that was giving me some insight into the lives of those that are sometimes disengaged from society for a variety of reasons. And as I graduated college, my first job out of the gate was I was an orderly in a psychiatric unit in a general hospital. And that gave me some really profound experiences. The highlight was they thought I actually knew what I was doing and let me have, I was in charge of the group counseling, group therapy for young adults. So that was pretty, I mean, I enjoyed those conversations and getting to know these people who have a mental health condition. The low light was I was, 6 foot and pretty strong. And so I had to be part of the team that would tackle people and put them in 4-point restraints when they were out of control. And I had never done anything like that to another human being. First time I did it, Trey, I went down to the chapel and I just cried. And I thought, there must be a better way. So about that time, I'd read about this place called Gould Farm in Massachusetts. And if you look into the history of Gould Farm, it's the country's oldest therapeutic community for people who are recovering from mental illness on 600 acres in the bucolic western portions of Massachusetts. So actually, I applied and got a job there. And it was such a kind and nurturing and supportive environment. And I saw people who were in great distress, lose a lot of that stress and start to feel fully human again in this life that they had there. Got to be the end of the first year. And on the one hand, I had a fellowship that was offered to me to get a PhD in criminal justice studies. And then I was thinking, I love Gould Farm. And, so I chose to stay with Gould Farm and mental health care work. And that was 18 years, Trey. I grew through every position there, picked up an MBA along the way because I was starting to love what Gould Farm was all about and starting to think, maybe I could help establish similar places. Maybe that's my calling. I actually did start Gould Farm's Boston program. That was 1978. I'm not sure what you were doing then, Trey.
Right. I wasn't even a thought in history at that point yet.
All right. So, my wife and I moved there with our oldest son, Dominic, and so we loved that. And so, yes, mental health work. And for me, I've been looking more for a calling than a career path, looking for a way to make a difference. And I've landed on trying to help make a difference in the lives of individuals and families who've been impeded by mental health conditions. So I've worked more sort of at an individual level rather than at a policy level. And that's one choice I think one can have in the mental health field. And because of this, I've worked in very close relationships with people, which in the mental health field, Trey, can put you in connection sometimes with pain.
Mhm.
But fortunately, I have experienced far more joy than I have pain in this experience with this kind of career.
Wow. No, I mean, for one, again, thank you for all you've done. Like just the impact that one person can have. Like you just put that on display. And everything you laid out, it just goes to show like the extensive experience and history that you have in this industry. So at Flawless, we're really trying to work to change the way that the world is perceiving mental health. So I kind of want to get your take on how you think things have changed since you have such, wide viewpoints on, in regards to discrimination towards mental health.
Okay, discrimination. Well, I let me return first to my work and therapeutic communities, which are really designed to help accept people who have a mental health condition, but they're accepted as loving, lovable people that you want to live with. Our four children grew up with people at the dinner table at night who were people with serious mental health diagnoses. So the idea of discrimination, I mean, we got along better with them than you would with your typical next door neighbor. And so one of the changes that I've seen over the years is, my wife and I really did feel called to try and help create places like Gould Farm. So we did one in Virginia called Gateway, one in Michigan called Rose Hill, and one in North Carolina called Cooper Reese. So we've tried to be part of that change. Another change that I've seen over the years, starting back in 1975, there was such an over reliance at that point on medication, because medication was thought to have been able to allow us to empty the state hospitals.
Mm.
Things like psychotherapy and so on, it was really minimized. But I've seen us change more toward biopsychosocial forms of care and treatment, not just bio. So that's a helpful change. Also, over the years, I think that what we still see trying to emerge is a mental health recovery movement. Earlier on, it was more like, oh, this is a permanently disabling condition. No, people with mental health issues can reach a state of recovery. That's not necessarily cure, but they can achieve and sustain their highest levels of functioning and fulfillment. I've also seen, our failed efforts, started in a sense by President Kennedy and the whole movement over 50 years ago to try and create a community-based system of care. Gosh, it's had some good success, but it's mostly failed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we closed a lot of the very bad state institutions, but now we have, 600,000 who are in prison with mental illness. We have, by some accounts, about 250,000 who are homeless on the streets. That's a travesty.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, discrimination. Oh. When I started, I don't know if I ever heard about a policeman killing someone with mental illness while they were trying to intervene. And today, according to Washington Post statistics, as many people with mental illness are being shot by police as are African Americans. And obviously, one of the great concerns we have right now is for racial justice. At the same time, we're trying to diminish discrimination against people with mental illness. We're not doing such a good job. Mostly, I think it's because people have increased fear because, we do have a lot of people who are homeless or in jail with mental illness, and they don't understand that actually people with mental illness are more often safer than your typical next door neighbor, literally. And again, our four children grew up with people at the dinner table every night with serious mental illness. I know our children loved it. They didn't feel discrimination. Yes, some people have arisen above stigma. I know a lot of people with serious mental illness that have gone on to live very fulfilling lives, even with their own families, their own careers. So, stigma and discrimination are not stopping people. But Trey, I fear right now that discrimination and stigma in regards to people with mental illness is actually getting a bit worse than better. We're seeing a tsunami of mental health distress. We're seeing suicide rates increase. And yes, we've got so many crises at a societal level that we're dealing with. But in this process, we're not paying as much attention as we should to people with mental illness. And we're too easily sort of setting them aside, ignoring them, sleeping in the doorways, ending up in prison. If society is to be judged by how well it takes care of its most vulnerable, Trey, we're not doing too well.
Wow. I mean, and that's the tough reality of what is, happening right now. Funny enough, I actually was a part of the Kennedy Forum, did a spotlight series on racial injustice and mental health and how that impacts everyone, but particularly like Black Americans. And the reality is kind of a stance that we've adopted at Flawless is that mental health is a social justice issue. Like this because as you said, it is affecting our most vulnerable people, and we have to do better. So it's a tough reality, but I definitely co-sign everything you just said. And it's interesting to hear your viewpoint that you think is getting worse than getting better. So, which is just
Mhm.
why our work is so important to continue. But
It
you
is.
also touched on. Oh, continue.
It is. It just thank you so much for what you and the team at Flawless are doing to push back on this and to push forward with visions of diminished discrimination. We
Mhm.
have to keep going. Have to keep pushing.
100%. Our founder Janine often says like this is life-saving work, and I really think it is. If we could just continue to push and fix the narrative, I think even if you affect one life, how far that goes. So
Mhm.
definitely very important work, and definitely thank you for the kind words. But you also touched on in going into your experiences, your time at Cooper Reese. And I'm very intrigued with Cooper Reese. And you kind of touched on farming and whatnot, but as founding executive director for Cooper Reese Healing Community, you guys had a very unique approach to healing and recovery. So again, you touched on it a little bit, but can you dive into what that was and why was it so beneficial?
Sure. Thank you for that. It's interesting. Unique approach, but from my point of view, it's like I think we were doing what people with mental illness deserve. Providing them with not, a worse kind of environment, but the best kind of environment, an environment that says to them, you're special.
Mhm.
And instead of just, an environment that was clinical, treating their diagnoses, an environment that, was kind, accepted them as a full human being, gave them a way to a meaningful and purposeful life. So yes, unique, but okay, how did we do that? Well, I mean, first of all, it's like all the places that I helped start Trade. It's nonprofit. And my wife and I were sort of called into this by Don and Lisbeth Cooper, the philanthropic founders. And it was on our first visit when they said, Virgil, all those hopes and dreams that you've had for trying to develop the best options for people to recover from mental health care. If you come, we'll make sure that it's funded. And my wife looked at me and she said, this is a calling. We got to do this. So we pulled up our stakes and gotten and drove and entered the Cooper Reese adventure in North Carolina with Don and Lisbeth Cooper. So if you were to drive onto the campus of Cooper Reese, some people have said, well, this looks like a small college. It's in a rural setting. And yeah, I think of it as a mental health recovery college. So there, we would focus as much on helping people develop their dream statement as we would on attending to their diagnoses. If all you do is attend to the symptoms of diagnoses, at the end, maybe you have the symptoms that are somewhat calm, but you still have someone who, sometimes I would say to people, Trey, what's your dream? And they would say, well, no one's asked me that for a long time. They keep asking, what's my diagnosis? So as you know, we all have some kind of impediments, and the stronger the impediments are, the more likely it is they aggregate into some kind of psychiatric diagnosis. But it is always most important to help keep someone's dream alive. So that's what Cooper Reese was founded on. And as a recovery college, the dream was like, when you go to a liberal arts college, you have a major.
Mhm.
So these were people coming to a recovery college. And so what was their major? What was their dream? And we were very serious about helping them achieve that dream. So on the diagnostic side, though, you need to have the best of mental health science, but that's far more than just taking a pill. Yes, a medication can sometimes be helpful, even life-saving, but you need to try and modify, minimize that as much as possible, because there's so much more that you can do. So having good psychotherapy, nutrition, exercise, neuroscientific initiatives, we had all of that wrapped into the program. And also to apply it, what I've learned over the years, Trey, is there's so many ideologies in the mental health world that can grab your attention. Well, this is the way you're supposed to do it, or this is the, wait a minute, listen to the individual, not the ideology. Listen to what works for them. So we were very individualized. That was part of the unique approach. And we were a total healing community. There you were a participant in a nurturing yet challenging lifestyle, a very kind environment that, we asked residents after, as they were leaving Cooper Reese, what they were experiencing. We did qualitative analysis of that exit data, and they said three things occurred. They had a greater sense of belonging, a greater sense of purpose, and a greater sense of resilience. Belonging, because they were allowed full participation in the community life of Cooper Reese. Purpose, yeah, we had work activity, volunteer work activity, everything from organic gardens to kitchen to wood shop where we made Native American flutes. Not that we were training people to be gardeners, but it was a lifestyle that showed them, you're much more than someone with a mental illness. You can contribute to the life that you're a part of. And then that gets the brain going as far as reminding you, oh, yes, I can have a dream. And then the other part of it was sometimes if you go into an isolated residential community, how do you get back to the real world? Well, Cooper Reese, at Cooper Reese, we created that. We had, I think when I left, it was 9 or 10 different homes in the Asheville community and apartment setups. So people could move back into this really cool, Asheville, North Carolina is a cool place. Accessible. People could go to college, they could get jobs. And even now, there are many former Cooper Reese residents who are living full lives in Asheville. So it's, the step-by-step nature of the program was also part of it. So it was a great opportunity that I feel privileged to have had a chance to be a part of.
It sounds like to me like you humanize them again. Like it's as if the way society sometimes treats those with mental health challenges, it could be a little dehumanizing, but it seems like to me like they regain their purpose and regain, like you said, like they're more than just their challenge. Like they are also a human being. Is kind of what I'm hearing from what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I have such admiration for the individuals I've seen over the years, and there have been several thousand actually.
Mm.
I've seen them go from, great senses of distress and diagnostic boxes to being full human beings. I saw some of our residents go on and get married with one another, have families, have careers. I mean, Trey, we all have some kind of issues that impede us.
Mhm.
None of us, I love that flawless is flawless, but we all have areas where we disengage and we have to push through, learn how to not be knocked off track. And people with serious mental illness have, bigger issues. But that is not a reason why they should be held back or set aside. They should have the chance for full engaged lives. And that's what a place like Cooper Reese does, and other places too.
Like literally life-saving work, so I'm definitely glad to hear that all that you've done. But when thinking about what you do at Cooper Reese, so what are the benefits that you see, facilitating recovery on a farm with physical activity, the gardening and whatnot, that we may not necessarily know about or receive the same way in a more traditional therapy setting?
Hmm. Well, a traditional quote therapy setting, think about that. It's often a very clinical setting. Like some programs will just be about, going from one group therapy to the next, to maybe individual session. It's all about, diagnoses and it's you're the sick one sort of thing. So the kind of environment that a place like Cooper Reese or Gould Farm or the others provide is an environment where you're also asked to be a contributing member, not just a receiving member. So how do you do that? Well, in the farm setting, you can set up opportunities for volunteer work kind of engagement that's very accessible to people sometimes whose self-confidence is pretty low. You can start out in the gardens, weeding carrots, and hopefully you pull up not the carrots, but the weeds. You can start in the greenhouse. You can, help in the kitchen. It's very accessible. You can participate and in the work setting, it's almost like, group therapy in the gardens, helping people engage, but they engage, they contribute, they realize, you sit around the dinner table at night and it's like, well, what was your day like? Well, I was a gardener today. I was, a holistic food preparer today. I was in the wood shop making Native American flutes today. So it creates a sense of identity that's accessible. Also, it offers a natural structure. It's very easy to have a structured lifestyle in that farm setting because it's all sort of under one roof. And research shows, especially for people with mood challenges, they need a structure, and that helps them with that challenge. It's also a very robust life that you can have in that rural or farm type setting. It's not like in a narrow office someplace. It's open. You can hear the birds while you're hearing the counselor, so on. It's also a quieter setting. And I found over years that, for someone who's experiencing psychosis, any additional noise of the urban setting can be triggering. So the quieter setting, in a rural setting can be helpful to them. But you know what? Thinking about being, going to a farm, almost no one that would go to a place like Cooper Reese or Gould Farm, would come from a farm. Hmm. Most often it was from a very urban setting. And the key is once they're on the farm, so to speak, and, getting back strength in their mental health, how do they get back to the more normal urban setting? And that's, where Cooper Reese was sort of unique. It had a step-by-step approach to actually getting people into college and having staff to help them be successful, help them get jobs, help them get their own housing. So that needs to be a part of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Man, that's just awesome to hear. We could talk about mental health all day, I feel like. But no, really definitely appreciate, the work that you've done with Cooper Reese and your, current practices and whatnot. But I did say we'd get back to the family side of things. So, especially because at Flawless, we like to give a lot of love to our older adult community, and your parents are such an inspiration. They recently celebrated, is it their 75th anniversary?
That's right.
Yeah, and that is just incredible in itself. But I want to ask, from a son's perspective, what is it that you've seen that really makes their inspirational relationship work so well?
Well, a variety of things, and I see it. I talk to them every day. I can't go see them right now until, especially, after our second COVID shot. Maybe I can start figuring out how to go see them again. But Trey, they have such a love for one another. In the evening, before my father, he generally goes to bed first. He always, goes over and gives my mother a good night kiss, even after 75 years. And also, what I've observed is gentleness and kindness. I don't think I've ever, and this is maybe incredible, but I've never really seen them get angry with one another. They probably have. On their anniversary, my father was asked, how do you feel? He says, we're on top of the world. I want to live until I'm 130, and he's 102. And after that, he sings, "You Are My Sunshine" to my mother. And she's just loving it. One key to, I think, their success too has been flexibility. My father retired in 1980. So that's quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, they moved to be with us as a family. They moved to Gould Farm where we were. I'm the only child. And we, had 4 children. So they moved to be nearby, but they were volunteers in all of these therapeutic communities where we worked, and they helped us set it up. So they are good examples of, how you need to awaken every day into a world that needs you. So my mother was a volunteer bookkeeper. My father was a volunteer maintenance man working with residents, showing them his gentleness and kindness. So that invigorated their retirement years, not so retired. So I'm really inspired by my father's gentleness, and my mother is a very thoughtful person. And one phrase I've heard over and over, Trey, is, Virgil, let your conscience be your guide. So, that, let your conscience be your guide. And the other thing that they say is, as far as their secrets to success, partly, is live every day fully and one day at a time. One day at a time. My father's always singing. But, yeah, no, that I am so privileged to have parents who are not only alive, but living on their own, living independently. I guess they're not old enough for assisted living yet at 102 and almost 92. Whenever I call them, and I call them every day, first questions are, how are the children? How are the great grandchildren? They feel wealthy. They're in the middle of so many family members. And I said, well, I did okay, right, as your only child. So, and another thing is, they are also people who show that adversity can sometimes create strength. They grew up in North Texas on sort of dirt farms, subsistence farms with their families, their parents. The Dust Bowl was happening, so Kansas would blow down to Texas every once in a while. They went through the Great Depression together. So, my father at the age of 10 was out in the fields with 4 horses plowing the fields. So they're physically strong, they're mentally strong. They're great examples. I'm so privileged to have had them in my life.
Yeah, they are a great example for really all of us to shoot for, but not even just on a relationship, standard, but also, I mean, as you said, for your dad to get over the age of 100 and your mother to be in her 90s, what's their secret to living such a long and healthy lifestyle? Like, how do they do it?
Well, I think, some of it is the physical strength and the mental strength that they've developed because of their upbringing. But, my father, like at his 100th birthday, he said, I don't want many people to come. No, not many people, just, a few people. So he cut the list off at 60. So we're in their living room, jam-packed with people, and people are saying, what's the secret to your long life? And when he comes back to, one day at a time, and he starts singing, and then he starts singing, Amazing Grace, and he starts singing like 6 songs and gets everyone singing. And so singing one day at a time, and he says, also, I drink a can of Mountain Dew every day. I thought, I don't know if that's a real secret. Yeah. So I I hope that, you know, I can be fortunate. I'm only 68, so they've been great examples. And, I know that I won't have them forever, but one day at a time, I'm loving the life that I have with them at this point, even though we're at a distance because of COVID.
Yeah, definitely. But even, like you said, all that they survived, and they can also add, a global pandemic to that long list of things. So that's really just a testament to their strength. So,
Mhm.
kudos to them, and kudos to your family. But I guess my last question for you, Virgil, is, we like to dream about creating a more flawless world. And that flawless, a lot of times we say that as a world where everyone sees the perfection in everyone. That's kind of how we like to call it. But everybody has their own definition. So after such a tough year, what is giving you hope for a better future? And what would a flawless world look like from your perspective?
Hope for a better future. Well, actually, as you say that, I've got to think first of all of my family. Our children, we have 4 children, and you know, they grew up in these therapeutic communities, and they're all in their own nonprofit ventures. They're all trying to make this a better world. They give me hope for a more flawless world. And I'm looking at our grandchildren. Our oldest is now 16. He was an intern with me this last summer because he wants to be a clinical psychologist.
Wow.
And the other grandchildren are like, one is about 8 months old, so there's a big span there. But I've got two grandsons who are out every Friday demonstrating for climate change issues, racial justice issues. So I have reason to have a lot of hope for a more flawless world as I look at my family. And we need to support young people in what they're doing. As I look at you, Trey, I see hope for a flawless world with your energy and what you want to bring to mental health care. I'm an optimist, and I love experiencing this youthful energy. I do have hope that we're going to get through this pandemic. I have hope that you know there will now be a better plan, that we can get vaccine out to more people, that people will be safer, and that we'll be able to you know get back together more easily. Because I also hope that with our new administration in Washington, that we can return to more communal action. I think in the local communities, that's where a lot of work needs to be done. There's still so much division in so many places, and I have hope that we can, at the local level, address that as well as at the national level. And I think about what can I still do in the area of mental health care. So yes, I'm an elder, I'm 68, but Trey, I'm not giving up yet.
No
As
need.
I mentioned before, I've written a book that during the pandemic was sort of a time to write a book. So I wrote a book called A Family Guide to Mental Health Recovery. Had a good editor that helped me get it from 300 down to 100 pages. And if it's okay, on this podcast with you, I would like to announce that I'm happy to send free copies of the book to any psychiatric hospital or psychiatric unit that would like to give it out to their families. So many families they don't know what's going on, especially after maybe a first hospitalization. And the families who've read this book have said, gosh, I wish I had this from day one. So I'm happy to give this away for free to those hospitals. And I don't know if this is 500 or 5,000 copies, but I'm happy to do it. I'm also not finished with the idea of therapeutic community. During this last year, learned that we now have about 8.4 million people in this country who are being cared for by their families. They may be in the apartment above the garage that's been built for them. They may be in the basement. They may be in a nearby apartment someplace. I've been approached by a lot of aging families this year, Trey, who are feeling very vulnerable, in part because of the pandemic. and the average age of their family member is 45, and they're very isolated. So I've begun working with a group that is looking at creating a nonprofit mechanism to offer the aspects of therapeutic community online. I'm not talking about therapy or psychiatry online, because that's existing and that is helpful. But I'm talking about how to try and help create a sense of community for people online. So that's still in the early phases, but I'm thinking it's something that could be of some value. So, one other thing, elders, this concept of retirement community, it's sort of bogus. We've got a lot of us that are retiring. It's another tsunami, the sort of silver-haired tsunami. And guess what? There were a lot of people who are still trying to figure out how to make a difference in life. So what I'm envisioning is the formation of elder communities, not just retirement communities, elder communities where there's a lot of mutuality, supporting one another. Predictions are that about 20% of the nursing homes, for example, are going to go out of business during the pandemic. We have to have different structures for elder care. So we need to build mutuality into it. And as my parents demonstrate, and a lot of the elders that I used to know at Gould Farm demonstrated, if you have a life of giving and sharing, you live longer and you live happier. So I want to be one of those elders, and I want to attract other elders into the concepts of community so that maybe we'll have more elder sort of achievement communities instead of retirement communities. There's still a lot to do.
Man.
But I have optimism.
Virgil, I'll tell you, first off, thank you for all the work that you've done in your career, in your lifespan to make this world a better place. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your wisdom. And then again, thank you for your generosity. Your book, A Family Guide to Mental Health Recovery, the fact that you're willing to offer that for free to help those that need it best, which is on Amazon for everybody listening. Thank you for that. So if people want to contact you, is there a best way for them to do that?
I do have a website, Virgil Stucker and spelled out Associates, plural.com. They're welcome to contact me through the website. I'm happy to hear from people if they have questions or if they want to help with any of these ideas. I'm happy especially to hear from young people, Trey, who want to work in the mental health field.
Definitely.
I'm happy to have spent, a good portion of my career focusing on people with mental health issues. It's a good place to be. So yes, I open the door to communication from those who are perhaps listening to this. And I'll even give you my phone number. It's 828-388-4673. Happy to receive a text or a call. Thank you, Trey. I wish you the best also with your emerging career. I sense a special energy from you and know that you're going to benefit a lot of people. I appreciate being asked by you to be in this conversation today.